and welcome to God Calling Vocation Vibes. These are conversations with little sisters of the poor on many aspects of vocation, God's call upon our hearts within our baptismal consecration, his call for how we are to live out our relationship with him in this world. And I'm Sister Carolyn, and I'm so happy to introduce our guest for today, Sister Constance Carolyn, little sister of the poor. Sister Constance, welcome.
Thank you.
And would you kindly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I grew up in a family of 4 kids in upstate New York. And when I was 15 years old, I started volunteering with the Little Sisters of the Poor with someone named Sister Carolyn. And not because I really cared about the elderly, and I had no thought of becoming a religious sister. I had never even talked to a religious sister. I started simply because I knew that it would look good on my college applications if I had community service. So I answered an ad in our church bulletin and began volunteering over the summer with 2 other girls. And right away, much to my surprise, I fell in love with the elderly and encountered God through the elderly. So that's kind of my vocation story in a nutshell.
Thank you, Sister Constance. So you and I go way back, and
Yes, we do.
Sister, Sister Constance is now the communications director for our religious family in the United States, and
Yes.
does an amazing job. And what we do is not only the work of our hands, but also a very important witness to respect for life. And that brings me to our topic today, which is respect for life and the vocation of a little sister of the poor. Sister Constance, would you like to lead off on that?
Sure. I wanted to be able to participate in the podcasts to take an opportunity to speak directly to young people, basically to say to them or to say to you, if you're a young person watching, that, pro-life work is really at the heart of the church and is so important in our world today. And we often think of pro-life work primarily as working on behalf of the unborn. But I would like to share with you today my convictions and my, I'll call it a call within a call or a vocation within a vocation, that caring for the elderly and the dying is also at the very heart of pro-life work.
Really, a lot of times people think that it is the unborn only, and they are so precious and so critical to our world. They're
Yeah.
our future, but most importantly, they're sons and daughters of God. And people think of the Respect Life movement as focusing on that age group, but not maybe realizing the extent to which so many other groups, age groups and disability groups, are involved in the whole issue of respect for life.
That's right. And I guess, okay, when I began my formation as a little sister, I was right out of college, and it was the late 80s. And I really didn't see my vocation as a pro-life vocation. I really didn't give it any thought. To me, the pro-life movement was all about abortion and the unborn, and that was very important, but that's not where God was calling me. So I really didn't give it any thought. And I went through my initial formation and made my vows, including the 4th vow of hospitality that we make as little sisters. And I was missioned out to my first home. And one day, we in community have the practice of eating most of our meals in silence, and we have reading or music during our meals. So that particular day, it was, we were reading from the Vatican newspaper, and we were reading a speech that Pope John Paul II had given to a group of lay people who collaborated with the Hospitaller Brothers of St. John of God. And I suppose that caught my attention right off, because we have very close spiritual ties with the Hospitaller Brothers of St. John of God through the history of our congregation. So at some point in that speech, I don't remember what I was eating, but we were just eating our meal, taking turns reading. It wasn't any special occasion. And I heard words from Pope John Paul II that I felt were being addressed directly to me, and which I believe would go on to like truly shape my personal vocation. And those words were, now I know them by heart. I don't want to mess them up just because I'm on a podcast. So his words were, see to it that life flourishes in each person. Insofar as you can, give back the smile and the joy of living to those entrusted to your care. So I'll repeat that. See to it that life flourishes in each person. Insofar as you can, give back the smile and the joy of living to those entrusted to your care. And those words just struck me so strongly. I mean, if you can imagine, I think we'd have to admit that often we're reading as we're eating. We're not listening like 100% or really retaining 100% what is said, but there was no mistaking it. For me, those words really went right to my heart, and they made me realize that you know, he was speaking to people who worked with the disabled and the sick, as we do, working with the elderly. And so he talked about life flourishing, about giving them back the smile and the joy of living. And I said right there and then over my, I don't know what it was, hamburger, whatever. That's what I have to do. That's what I want to do, is to help enable the elderly to experience that their lives are flourishing and that they have a smile and joy in their lives. And not just that we've added years to their lives, but that we help add life to their remaining years. And so I think that kind of became like my personal vocation, if you will. I know many little sisters who would say, if asked what is their greatest joy or the high point of their vocation, that it's the watch with the dying, the vigil, the prayerful vigil that we keep with the dying. And that is, in our rule of life, that is considered the high point of our vocation. But for myself, it's always been seeing that joy in the residents, seeing that happiness when we help them to be meaningfully engaged in life around them, however that might look. And, just that they're experiencing their lives still as meaningful. That's always been my greatest joy as a little sister.
And I think people are surprised when they come to our homes and they see how alive the residents are, even at a very advanced age. We have many over 100 in our home, as I'm sure you do in your, Sister Constance, but they're still full of vitality. And I think that the young adults who come, we have many groups of college students and young adult groups and so forth who come for a service afternoon with us, or to do a special event with us, or just have a friendship day to visit with the residents, to serve their meal and then sit and visit with them, spend time with them in the afternoon. It's really beautiful to see. But the young people are always so amazed at the joy that they see here. And I think it's because God's love is the heart of the home. And we little sisters are called to be instruments of that love. And as imperfect as we are, we try to just let him shine through us and lift up the hearts of these elderly people. And so it's like an amazing witness for our world that is so in need of that joy, and for
Yeah.
these young people especially.
And sometimes we can see that too, not only through residents who are flourishing physically. Like I can remember in my first experience volunteering in the home, when I was volunteering under yourself, there was a woman, her name was Mary Keene. I don't know if you remember her, but she
I do.
was a little Irish woman. I believe she was dying of cancer. She was almost emaciated because of her illness. Um, and, I, even as a teenager, I could perceive that she was suffering, but she had a purpose in life because she was making these little yarn dogs out of yarn and coat hangers that you taught her to make. And she would wind this yarn, and she knew that they were being sold to raise money for the missions. And so part of what we did as young volunteers, every Saturday when we would go to the home, we would report into Mary and pick up her yarn that she had worked on during that week, and then finish off the dogs for her. And I think maybe she got one done every week. And I just remember that, like, even though she was somebody who was quite weak and frail, she still really had a purpose in life. And also, besides making the dogs, she was a huge prayer. She was a prayer warrior, always praying her rosary. And so that was a very early experience for me of, seeing what a difference it can make in someone's life, when they have a real purpose. And I remember as her illness progressed, she became more and more frail, and there was kind of a certain odor about her and in her room, and it began to permeate her little projects. And I can remember bringing them home and trying all kinds of air fresheners and everything of the day to get the smell out so that she could keep going and selling these things, because it meant so much to her. So that became part of the process, was bringing Mary's dogs home and cleaning them up a little bit. And yeah, it just meant so much to her. So yeah, I think I was only 15 at the time, but I never forgot her. And then, later on, so that was my first assignment, the quote that I shared about from Pope John Paul II. And then I went over to France to prepare for my final vows. And I believe that during the time I was in France, there was debate in the European Parliament about, I'm not sure if it was about assisted suicide or euthanasia or both. I don't really remember. But our Mother General at the time wrote a public statement that was published widely, including in the Vatican newspaper, about the value of the lives of the elderly and why they should not be, why assisted suicide and euthanasia were so dangerous and wrong. And I can remember that being another moment, kind of like a personal revelation to me, like, oh, we have to stand up and defend the lives and the dignity of the elderly. And so at the end of we call it the second novitiate, when I made my perpetual vows, I had convinced myself that I would not be coming back to the United States. I had even voiced that willingness to our Mother General that I not come back to the United States. That's another story I could go into a different day. But anyway, when I made my vows, wasn't I assigned right back to the United States, to New Jersey of all places, and I'm from New York State, so I couldn't have gotten much closer to home. And it kind of puzzled me, because I thought I was so willing to offer up, my own country and to serve elsewhere. But as I prayed, I realized, I said, okay, if I'm going back to the United States, I don't have to speak in a different language. I don't have to, take on a new culture. I must be going back there so that I will speak out in the milieu in which I'm, comfortable, in my own cultural milieu. God is asking me to speak out about the value and the dignity of the lives of the elderly. And so I came back to the country with that kind of, I guess you could call it a missionary attitude. And that was a couple of years before Pope John Paul II published the Gospel of Life, even. I believe he published that in 1995, and this was in 1992. But in 1993, it was announced that he was coming to the United States for World Youth Day, which was celebrated in Denver. And there were a lot of naysayers saying that, American youth wouldn't be into him, that people wouldn't come. Well, anyway, long story short, it turned out to be a huge success. The theme of the World Youth Day was, I came that you might have life and have it to the full. So a lot of World Youth Day that year was focused on questions of life and the protection of life. And much of what the Holy Father said revolved around that theme. And I had another moment with him it was during the final mass it was the Feast of the Assumption, and it was in Cherry Creek State Park. So we were outside in a huge outdoor venue, really very kind of a wild terrain. It wasn't like a fancy park. It was just like a state park. It was dusty and gritty, and so he was giving his homily, and in the middle of his homily, it was almost like the crowd of hundreds of thousands of people disappeared, and I felt like he was speaking just to me for just a couple of minutes. And so I'd like to share what he said. I have this one written down. I don't have it memorized, but because I want to make sure I get it right. So he said to us, young pilgrims, Christ needs you to enlighten the world and to show it the path of life. The challenge is to make the church's yes to life concrete and effective. The struggle will be long, and it needs each one of you. Place your intelligence, your talents, your enthusiasm, your compassion, and your fortitude at the service of life. And so those words connected right in for me with the words I had heard in our convent dining room a couple of years earlier about making sure that life flourishes in those for whom I care. And so it just gave me an even stronger sense that I had a personal mission to defend the lives and the dignity of the elderly, and to make sure that in to whatever measure I could, that I made life flourish for them, and gave them back that smile. And so I guess that's just what I want to share with young people, is that life at the beginning certainly needs defense and protection, and that's still a very necessary and noble and worthy cause in our country. But also, to protect those who are the most vulnerable at the end of life is surely another way that God is calling us to serve life.
Thank you. Again, this is God Calling Vocation Vibes. I'm Sister Carolyn, and I have with me Sister Constance Carolyn. We are Little Sisters of the Poor, sharing on the vocation of a Little Sister of the Poor with regard to respect for life and the pro-life movement, and the issue of the value of each and every human life, and the vocation to be at the service of life. So, Sister Constance, she I'm telling you a little secret, but after she helped with the yarn dogs with Mary Keene, she actually went into occupational therapy. She studied OT in college and became a licensed occupational therapist, and was able to work directly with our residents as a little sister therapist. And then over time, she became our communications director, which is the role she holds now, of course. And it has always been a very beautiful witness to me how she holds that direct contact with the elderly poor as a very important part of her days. And so each little sister of the poor, no matter what we do, we might be an administrator or a director of nursing or a social worker or whatever, but no matter what we do, we always have a lot of direct contact with our residents. They're our family, and we know that we serve and love Jesus in them. And so that's a beautiful aspect of our vocation, that from the time that we enter and throughout our years as a little sister, no matter how our duties change or evolve, the elderly and Jesus in the elderly poor will always be at the heart of what we do each day.
Yes, and you mentioned that I studied occupational therapy, and it was also during my college years that um, I can say that my vocation was really affirmed, because when I was studying OT, my class was all girls. I think there's guys who go into OT now, but in my day it was all girls. And almost everyone in my class, if they had a specific area of interest back then of where they wanted to work, where they envisioned themselves working, it was usually with pediatrics, so with children. And there were only a couple of us in my class who really took an interest in the elderly, and who said that was the area of of OT that we wanted to work in. And so that really, like, in reflecting on that, it made me realize all the more that, like, God had given me this special vocation because I had such a heart for older people. I didn't hate kids, but I knew I wasn't called to work with children, and I was called to work with the elderly. So that gave further impetus, like, to my vocation.
And it's interesting how God works, because we have many happy little sisters who went to school for education, and they thought they were going to love teaching, and then somehow, and that is indeed a beautiful and greatly needed apostolate. But then when they encountered the charism of the Respect Life charism of the Little Sisters of the Poor, and felt that spirit of welcome and hospitality, and saw the witness of littleness, which is our gift the church has given us to portray littleness to the world, and to always strive for humility of heart after the example of our mother founder, St. Jean Jugan. And so, when people see that, that's the gift that our congregation gives to the world, and young people will abandon or transition from whatever it was they thought was going to bring them great joy in life, to embrace this charism, which is a good fit for their hearts. And likewise, there are young women out there who are nurses, and you'd think maybe it is a congregation like ours that they might be called to, and they end up in a teaching community. It's all God's call on the human heart. It's a very personal thing. We little sisters are always happy to accompany spiritually young women who are in discernment, and you can reach us at LSPUSA-Podcast at gmail.com to get that set up. But ultimately, the journey is between you and Jesus. It's a very sacred, awesome thing. And we're here to support you and to pray for you and to help you any way we can to find that place, that vocation where your heart will be happiest.
Amen.
Amen. Yes. Sister, let's talk just a little bit more about hospitality. We did have Sister Ellen Ann on one of our podcast episodes to talk more fully about hospitality, but you had mentioned about our relationship with the Brothers of St. John of God and the vow of hospitality we received from them. That is a vow that everyone in their order takes. And in that vow, we serve Jesus himself in the person of the elderly poor. So we are not just doing a social work. We're not just doing a good deed. Anyone could do that, but we are serving, loving, and actually adoring Jesus himself in the person of the elderly poor. So, sister, could you please comment a little further on that?
Well, yes. And okay, relating it to my own vocation, like when we talk about, or when I think about bringing meaning into their lives and helping to foster the flourishing of their lives, I don't just think of it in terms of entertainment. And bingo's great, but hey, there's only so much bingo that you can take in life. Like, I'm always trying to help them really experience their lives as having purpose, as as having a mission. And that I would like to think that that desire comes from my conviction that they really do have a purpose and a mission in life, that they have wisdom to pass on, that they have experiences to share with younger generations. And that all goes back to that inviolable dignity of every human life at whatever age and regardless of disability. And I think our foundress, St. John Jugan, influenced by the Brothers of St. John of God, she too would try to find meaningful occupations for the residents to sometimes it was to help make ends meet, but I think it was also that she had that sense that people need to feel needed. That's part of the human experience. And so the more we can do that for the elderly, help them to still experience that they're needed and appreciated, I think that's a beautiful gift that we can give them. And they in turn give us the gift of sharing their lives and their wisdom with us.
So if any of you would like to have an experience in our homes serving the elderly, we have various programs. Some of them are live-in service programs for young women. Some are group service opportunities for men and women, or individual service opportunities. And Sister Constance is about to unveil a brand new program for the coming year. It will involve some brief immersion experiences, and I'm really looking forward to seeing young people participate in that and benefit our residents, but also grow spiritually and discover the joy of serving the elderly poor through that experience. So next time, we are going to have with us Mother Margaret Charles and Sister Lourdes, Sister Maria Lourdes. They will be talking to us about a topic that young discerners often ask about. What do sisters do for fun? So that will be our next episode. Be sure and join us. And Sister Constance, I want to thank you so much for helping and sharing with us about the gospel of life, the value of the human life of the elderly, and the beauty of the little sister of the poor vocation as it relates to respect for life. Did you have any final word before we
Yeah,
close?
I would just like to say to any young people who might listen to this, I work a lot with seminarians who come into our home, and I always tell them, um, you know, it's not as natural to have a heart and to feel attracted toward older people as it is toward children and young people, but to open themselves up to that and to ask God to give them a heart for the elderly. And so I would suggest that for any young people to ask our Lord to give you a heart for the elderly so that you'll be caring and compassionate with them.
Thank you,
As a
sister.
little sister of the poor, maybe.
That would be great. That would be great. So again, we welcome your comments, your questions. If you would like discernment assistance, if you would like us to just walk with you spiritually, if you're a young woman in vocational discernment, or just want to learn more about our vocation, feel free to contact us at lspusapodcast at gmail.com. In the meantime, Sister Constance, Carolyn, and I, and all of our little sisters and our residents and our whole hospitaller family, pray every day for you and for your journey with Jesus, for your own vocation. May it be blessed.